Welcome to the Strong Bull Podcast, where serious athletes come to get after it. No shortcuts, no nonsense, proven methods backed by real science and training that hits hard. With over 40 years of combined experience, we're here to help you train smarter, lift heavier, and stay ahead of the game. Thanks for listening. All right, guys, welcome back to the Strong Bull Podcast. I'm here, Dom Dixon, and I'm here with my boy, Rob De La Cruz. We appreciate you guys tuning in every week. You know, we're loving pumping these out, and we're hoping to get many more to you and cover much more topics, have you guys write in and obviously talk a little bit more about some of the things that we have going on here at Cerus Performance. But the first thing, man, we got a lot on the docket today, Rob. How you feeling?
Feeling good.
Good, yeah. Get ready to dive into it. Well, if you guys are catching this in real time, this is the first week of the 2025 CrossFit Open, which is kind of like what we're going to talk about a little bit in a sense later on in today's discussion about some CrossFit, some Metcons, some of the different practices. Rob's been in the sport for what, like 20 years almost?
Yeah, close to that.
Yeah, I've been in it almost a decade with CrossFit. So, yeah, we're going to give our opinions on just the overall general idea behind Metcons, behind CrossFit, pros and cons. But the first thing we're going to talk about is training programs. In your opinion, Rob, I'll let you go first. Are there red flags in training programs that you've seen over your 2 decades in the space?
Yeah, there's always a ton of red flags that you want to look for. And it could be, and it's the same. It's like either a CrossFit or whatever other training program someone's out there selling or sponsoring or getting behind. But one of the things I look at is the first thing is one workout I try not to criticize, because that's just telling, I mean, it could be bad or good or whatever, but that's not really telling me the full story.
Yeah.
A lot of times I like to see at least a week. And if I could see more than the week, that even gives me more of a story. In a training program, especially like to me, should be telling a story of where you're trying to take people.
Mm-hmm. And
that story I should be able to tell by the second week. 1 week is great to see, but by the second 1 week, only seeing 1 week is going to allow me to do is just look for the red flags of, are they overdoing body parts too much? Is it similar movement patterns that they're touching constantly? And where are they missing? Is it well balanced? Does it have a good amount of strength with a good amount of different types of conditioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, the same thing. I can pretty much look at it from week 2. Is there structure? Is there progression? You know, not saying that everything has to be periodization, because if you have general population athletes, a lot of times they're not leading up to a big game. They're not leading up to a contest or whatever it is. They just really want some structure in their training. And you can kind of put them on that yearly cycle of strength, power, you know, conditioning, whatever the case is. But I can definitely tell by week 2 that a program is just random. It's what I like to call like trends, where a coach who's looking at the program is on a trend, whether they like to deadlift a lot. They want everybody deadlifting, you know, at a certain rate and rep scheme. And then you find that trickles into more of the program. They don't know how to do it. So it's like a one rep scheme fits all. We're going to do this rep scheme no matter what the exercise is, no matter what the time of the year is, no matter what period we are in our training. So those are big red flags that I see, absolutely, kind of like piggybacking off what you say, repeated movement patterns, you know, same conflicting movement patterns as well. And a lot of people get burnt out. You see a lot of injuries when that happens. So those are big red flags to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm always looking for, like, is the fundamentals really there in the basics? Like, are they? And especially, it depends on what they're going for. But if it's more like a general population, just like a strength and training program,
yeah,
and conditioning, then are they doing the fundamentals? Is there versions and progressions of squats, lunges, presses, pulls, and carries?
Yeah. Now,
you know, and hinges.
Yeah. When we talked about this briefly when we were actually riding back from Miami, do you think that the general population programs should be squatting twice a week for strength?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but I don't I don't think it's necessary because they're going to still see really big benefits if you have like a dedicated strength and then the other one is a different type of squat. I do like to touch the body parts
Yeah.
twice a week,
Yeah.
and it just depends on what type of programming you're putting together.
Yeah.
Now, 3 times a week would be, I would think, would unless the rep scheme's really low and not very heavy, you're just gonna have wear and tear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
Now,
do like body parts touched twice a week, but there's plenty of data out there, and it's clear 1 time a week is going to be real beneficial, especially
yeah.
to someone that's really active. And you got to think of general population. What are their stress levels? What are they doing? Can they recover from twice a week?
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Now that goes into the next part about CrossFit, because we've been in CrossFit gyms where in their head, they justify a lot of the times some of these coaches that are CrossFit programmers that we squat on Monday, whether that's back or front squat. Wednesday is squat clean or some form of wall ball or goblet squat, you name it. And then Friday is like lunges, right? So we've seen that trend a lot in CrossFit. In your opinion, how, if that is a red flag, and how big of a red flag is that in general programming for CrossFit athletes?
Well, one thing a lot of CrossFit coaches, I believe, that they don't pay attention to is when you're doing it in those movement patterns with, say, squatting in certain applications in an environment, it could be more damaging than when not. So, for instance, let's go ahead and take at the level 1, they used to do Fran, but they don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and it's been a while, but they do 21-15-9 of thrusters and burpees, which is like, it could be anywhere from a 3 to 6 minute workout, and it burns you up and everything. And you go through it really quickly. If you go through it in 3 minutes and it's essentially 45 reps each, you're going to be sore the next day.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of damage going on there, and it's tough on the CNS. Now let's go ahead and let's change that, and let's go make it 4 sets of 12 each with 2-minute rests. You're not even going to know you did that workout, but it's the same amount of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when coaches are programming, they got to realize like the more intensity they have, it's basically, and it's kind of, this is not exactly, but there's a little more damage going on.
Yeah.
So now you're doing, so you got to equate that to like, it's actually more reps than you're really thinking it is or you're programming.
Absolutely.
So there needs to be a little more rest in between those. So you could be wearing and tearing people down. But most people, the problem is like Greg Glassman's original 21-15-9, 45 reps is rock solid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
For general population, you start getting into 50, 60, 70 reps.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's symmetrical, very symmetrical.
Yeah. Now you're going to run into, and especially in a conditioning workout where there's a lot of intensity and fatigue, that you start getting those higher rep ranges, you're taking away that movement pattern for days.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Technically, it should be for people to recover from it properly.
Yeah. I don't think, in my opinion, I'm a very big volume guy. I look at things volume wise, and that's how I usually program. So when I go into a CrossFit gym and I look at the overall, because of obviously volume for pacing, if you're into, trying to get a decent time or trying to, pace the workout itself, a lot of the times I'll look at things and I can promise you that whoever's programming has no clue that this is that amount of volume. Because if you really think about it, nobody who's in the right mind of programming or has a general sense of how the body works and volume itself, you look at the volume you have during the strength session, you look at the volume you have during the Metcon, and then you look at the next day. So a lot of times you'll see coaches where it'll be 10, 8, 6, 4, 4 in the strength work for back squats. And then you go into the workout and it's, I don't know, 150 wall balls. In their head, they're not the same movement. They're not the same exercise, but they're the same exact movement. And I think that a lot of people that's one of my biggest pet peeves in CrossFit is the repeated movement patterns in the amount of repeated volume that is occurring throughout the week on the same exact body part, which is why for a long time, I have a hard time saying that CrossFit is an effective way of exercising because of that. I do think, in my opinion, that it can be effective, extremely effective. I've seen it. I've benefited from it a lot. But I will say a lot of the times that in these CrossFit gyms, it's not effective. It's actually harmful for most people that go to these gyms that have no clue that they are essentially going backwards. And they were at one point better when they walked in the door, but now they're not. Now they're going the
I
opposite.
100% agree with you
Yeah.
with that. And the thing is that like when you strictly follow that the methodology and you kind of like don't open your mind, you're checking the boxes on what it's telling you to do, and
Yeah.
you're disregarding other things that are probably more important than checking the boxes on those.
Absolutely.
And you've heard me say this before, but like I'll say it again. So like volume and intensity, they're dials on an amplifier for speakers.
Yeah.
Burn those up too high for too long, you're going to blow a speaker.
Yep. Absolutely.
So they need to be certain balance on there.
Yeah. And do you think that for so long that has been the narrative? Obviously, we've talked about that off camera, that it's the narrative has been that turn both of the dials up as high as you can and see how long you can hold.
Correct.
Do you think that nowadays that people who once said that are starting to retract that? And do you think that in their head that CrossFit is still effective way of training?
There's a lot of there's so much argument online, and
Yeah.
it kind of drives you like you see everybody going back and forth, and then you always have this new layer of young purists, and then the old layers kind of
Yeah.
started opening their mind up a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is kind of, and I'm sure there's going to be like some people getting upset, but one thing CrossFit did really well, like with their education, is they got a lot of people to think that they have a lot more experience than they really do in
Oh yeah.
understanding how things really work when it comes to training.
That's what Rob Wolf said. What was his line that what Greg Glassman did?
Yeah. Oh, that was John Wellborn. With like,
John
but that
Wellborn.
was with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
capacity. But you have a lot of people that are like, they don't have the time training people and just watching person after person and watching them age and you age. Because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like a 50-year-old person that trains really well and trains hard has a whole different perspective than a 30-year-old.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even
And you
their
can't
overall
disregard
approach.
that, like because what they've seen, and a lot of those older athletes in CrossFit, they started realizing the ways of their training. Now, a lot of them were you're in a sport. So I
Yeah.
can guarantee if football players tell you they're not going to train like they were training when they were playing football. You played football.
Yeah. Absolutely. No.
So things do change, but what I see them is they become like open-minded, and
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is being open-minded.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there is a lot of coaches that are closed-minded, and I don't really understand why, especially if your playing days are over for the overall scheme of it. Do you think it's one of those things where it's like this worked for me once? Like we see it all the time in fads and people diet. Like, oh, I did keto and it worked the first time I did keto. It's like, yeah, well, of course it worked the first time. And the fact that you said it worked the first time lets me know that it didn't really work because you're trying it again.
100%. And the
That
thing is,
same concept works for CrossFitters.
yeah, you want to remember like that. Like a lot of people always go back and forth. There's a big argument, but like all franchise, the next latest franchise, or all of them, any of them, Orange Theory, like everything works in the
Yeah,
beginning
absolutely.
until it doesn't work.
Yeah,
And some
exactly.
of them have a little more legs than the other ones, and they work a little longer. But
Yeah,
eventually, like it'll stop working, and you'll have to change things a little bit. Now the problem is there open mindedness to be able to change things and tweak it. So I was taught like from a coach a long time ago, made me respect him right from the beginning because some of the stuff I didn't agree with. But he says, "Hey, this is my method that I put together.
yeah,
I use principles. Don't stick to my method. Just learn some of the principles that you think will work, and
hmm
then keep on learning. And then eventually you'll put something together. But don't have blinders on to them because of a method."
yeah.
And I like right from the beginning, I was like, oh, he's very open minded. So, like, a lot of times what happens is you might be going against what the method is teaching, and then that causes everybody to push back from
Yeah, yeah, because they people follow the method. It's kind of like when you're giving directions and people are following you and then you reroute. They're like, wait, where are you going? Where are you going? No, I'm getting to the same destination. I'm just taking a different route because I've learned there's a faster, better, whatever. I think I found that a lot too with like when I started believing some of the methods and different practices that I started with. I'm like, oh, it's got to be that way. This isn't aligned. What I'm doing isn't aligned with that methodology. So maybe I should retract back. But it's like, no, there's different ways to get the job done. But I do think there should be principles in place. Like you stand for your principles, maybe like you said, change the methods. And I think CrossFit, you know, one pro that they do have is that they are really they're the structure of CrossFit I think was ideal, right? Like the building that it was in was ideal. Like bring people in, you know, a lot of times where you could give them, you know, a lot of direction in a short period of time, not necessarily racing, but like you can, there's an implement of a workout with a grand scheme of reps in mind, and you can accomplish that with a unique way of getting to that end goal with the workout. And it's efficient. People who sit on the couch all day, they want to get them up moving, give them an hour where they got to work out under a certain coach-led warm-up and workout, great. But then you start dipping into these different pools of running yourself into the ground is where CrossFit lost me.
Well, there's an over application and an inappropriate application of the
Yeah,
intensity, and especially they overuse the Metcon.
absolutely. Now, do you think?
Not everybody does, but
Yeah.
the majority of them do.
Now you've been in business for a long time. You've been extremely successful with Vera, and you've changed, I'm sure, within the last 5 to 7 years, your methodologies of training your members, right? Like I'm sure
Oh
you've
yeah,
moved a lot from because at one point Vera was a CrossFit gym, right?
yeah. We were one
CrossFit.
of the earlier CrossFit gyms actually in CrossFit, and one of the like early ones in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So real quickly, in your opinion, what was a pro that you still use today, and what was a con that you quickly realized you had to get rid of in your practice with, you know, programming with your members? You know, obviously people have stayed there through everything that CrossFit's been through. I'm sure they probably joined the gym at one point in time because they were CrossFit addicts. They wanted to be a part of the cult of CrossFit, lack of a better word. But what would you say one pro that you still use today, and what con that you quickly got rid of?
Well, CrossFit puts an emphasis on like a lot of the big compound movements, and I think fundamentally most of those are squat, the press, the hinge. And
Yeah,
that, that was a that was an emphasis that at the time nobody was really paying that much attention to as much. And I think that's really important. That was definitely a pro.
yeah, okay,
The biggest con I would say is the overemphasis on work capacity and the speed that you should be able to do things, and what's measurable is like
yeah,
what you can figure out can always be measurable. Like there's too much emphasis on that.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that like there shouldn't be an element and that can't be like somewhat important, but
yeah,
at one point in time, that's like all that matters.
yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And that's in their level one, like work capacity over mobile domain. And like all this, all the information that they put out there is, but even with the open, since we were talking about it a little bit, there's so much emphasis on that. And
Yeah,
as many things as they say is beneficial, they rarely mention all the things that are cons. And it just
absolutely.
creates like a hierarchy too often.
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
sometimes it's real beneficial, but in its human nature is if something is good, and we saw that with the intensity and hit, it came across as it was good. Let's go ahead and let's use it all the time.
Yeah,
Once you start making it like using an over application, then now instead of being a benefit, it becomes a detriment. And
absolutely.
that's kind of like what I've seen and what I tried to move back away from.
Yeah, and essentially, you know, we talked about it before. Like one of the biggest cons with CrossFit and Metcons in general is that it's essentially taking something that should not be racing and you're racing it, exercise.
Yeah.
Exercise for the most part. Now there is the one percenters, there's the few athletes in this world that can exercise for sport and make a living, and we love to watch all those things. But for general population, there's in your opinion, do you think that Metcon should not be exercise racing?
Well, so CrossFit is essentially cross training, concurrent training. So there's been circuit training that has been around since I was young.
Yeah, forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been versions of it. Now, putting the clock on it and the movements they use have kind of, they did it completely different. Now, I like exercise racing.
Yeah.
That's essentially what a Metcon
Yeah.
is.
We all
And
do.
going
Yeah.
for having more work capacity means you're faster.
Yeah.
So
Better
that's
shape.
essentially
Yeah.
you're exercising and you're getting faster.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I do personally like it a lot, and I will use that tool. But like I said, I think it's often abused, and that's what like the main focus point is, and that's going to
Yeah.
create a whole bunch of issues when that's the main focus point.
Yeah.
Now, I think you can get people to be able to do it with certain movements safely if you
Yeah.
can teach them composure and how to do those movements right.
Yeah.
But it is exercise racing. And if you think about if your whole program is surrounded and like all around exercise racing, just
Yeah.
think about that for a second. Because
Oh,
that's what it is.
yeah. It's you're in a constant loop of a test.
Yes. And I
Ultimately.
like it, but I'm not going to do it every day, nor should I think general population should either.
Well, I think you said it best. A
Once a
couple.
week, maybe
Yeah.
twice a week at the most.
I think you said it. You said it best. You don't use the same tool in the toolbox every time you go to work. It's like I think a lot of CrossFit gyms or even High Rocks. Like it's like when we are working out, it's a test. And I forget who said it, but this is a quote I tell all my clients too. It's exercise is not a test, but an opportunity to better perform your fitness and your
Yes.
health and wellness. It's like when we take working out as an opportunity to test ourselves and how fit we are, it no longer becomes a workout. It becomes a test. When you take an exercise or working out as an opportunity to get better for your health and wellness, when you do test, you perform better during your test, basically. And I think that the sports of fitness now has adopted that race mentality for game day, whether that's a CrossFit competition, whether that's a High Rocks race or the games or whatever. And they've blended that into the entire methodology of training. Now, every time we work out, it's got to be a test.
Well, there's not enough practice like you're
Not enough
talking
practice.
about.
Yeah.
And they're testing and their racing is
Yeah.
their practice, which it's not.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and the thing is, like, if they need to emphasize more of the practice
Yeah.
and less of, they almost have it like backwards,
Yeah.
like most of those programs. And like I said, not all of them, but they can be effective,
Yeah.
but they're more effective for testing like what you've already worked on and the skills you have. So,
Exactly.
like, take High Rocks. So, all methods, all exercises, all principles are tools. Okay. And
Yeah.
they're different type of tools. So the hybrid's gotten really popular. So what is the argument against the hybrid? Is that it's essentially separated exercise.
Yeah.
Okay. And I get it. But what High Rocks is are tools that you separate them and you're working on those individually and now you're building them up. What is CrossFit? It's a multi-tool
Yeah.
and it does a lot of different things,
Yeah.
but it's a multi-tool. And sometimes you need the saw to build up your aerobic capability. So you need to do the fundamental work
Exactly.
or the classic strength and conditioning strength training,
Yeah.
5x5s to build the funnel. So now through hybrid or whatever you're using, now you're building a bigger base. So if you
Absolutely.
got a bigger base, your potential to mix it is
It's a
high.
lot higher. Yes,
But if you're
absolutely.
only mixing it, your potential is gonna be less.
Yeah,
It can
absolutely.
do all that, but it's a much smaller version.
Yep. I agree.
So it's
Um,
like having that multi-tool and you're trying to screw things in. It's like, yeah, you can do it, but man, it's gonna take you forever to put all the doorknobs on a house. Or I have a drill gun and I'll use this for a while and create this big base of aerobic or strength.
yep.
And
I agree.
then I could use this tool to finish the house from
Yeah.
these little things instead
Yeah.
of dragging out this big drill.
You said it perfect, man. You said it perfect. Now, as we finish this episode, um, I'm sure people listening right now are probably like, second guessing some of the program, which is normal. Like we all do when we hear new information. And we encourage you guys to not only challenge what we're saying, but ask questions and ask why we're saying why we believe these different beliefs towards CrossFit or any exercise that involves, the same structure like High Rocks. But in your opinion, do you think, as we finish up, that Metcons are effective, right, in some practices? And if somebody's listening right now and they're wanting to maybe open up their mind to changing how they program for their general population members, how would you, as a veteran in this space, advise them to put that into practice? Like, I know you guys use Metcons to some degree, every once in a while, maybe once, like we said, once or twice a week. How should somebody start implementing that now that is a programmer or a CrossFit owner or a gym owner?
Well, I believe Metcons, they can be really effective, but over application, then we become ineffective.
Yeah. So how would you implement those? How would you use that as an application starting out right now? If you were like, hey, I've been beating the drum,
working on things that
yeah.
they practice ahead of time.
Yeah.
Having them prepared to actually do the Metcon and those movements and understanding it. So the training has to be understanding the pace, to be able to repeat those movements over and over again, not to go ahead and let themselves kind of fall apart within there, because that's where the danger becomes. And also in programming is programming exercise pairing and also proper rep schemes that aren't going to drag them out to where no matter who they are, their technique and movement quality is just going to degrade. Because the more you go and you use movements with bad movement quality, the more wear and tear you have.
Absolutely. I agree.
So like exposure to that is not a big deal, like small exposures here and there, but large exposure all the time is going to be a problem.
Absolutely. Then like you said, you have to do more to get the same stimulant of what you're trying to chase because you do so much of it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there just needs to be more practice, and they need to be more prepared and less of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we appreciate you listening. That episode. If you guys have any questions, by all means, you guys can reach out. We're going to keep pumping these out. If you guys have any topics that you want us to cover in future episodes, please be sure to send those in. All right, guys, thanks for listening.